When the voice note popped up on my phone, I didn't want to listen. I mean, who wants to hear their daughter-in-law scheming behind their back? But curiosity got the better of me, and within seconds, my whole world twisted into something I never imagined. She's getting too close to Dad's money. We have to make sure she's out of the picture before the will gets settled. The voice whispered, sharp and cold. It was unmistakably Jenna, my son's wife. The same woman I had welcomed with open arms 5 years ago. The same woman I'd believed was part of the family. For years, I poured my heart and soul into supporting them. After my husband passed, I moved in to help with their baby while Jenna went back to work. I paid for groceries, covered the utility bills, even chipped in $350 a month towards their rent because I wanted my son and grandson to have stability. I never once asked for repayment. I thought that was what family was for. But that voice note? It shattered everything. I sat there, the phone heavy in my trembling hand, as memories flooded back. The dinners I cooked, the nights I stayed up soothing a feverish child, the countless birthday presents I carefully picked out. And now, all of it was just a transaction in Jenna's cold calculation. The inheritance, the house, the savings, the pension she knew I planned to leave to my son, was her real prize. I remember the day I first moved in. September 14th, 2018. The lease was $1,200 a month for their small apartment, and I was paying a third of it because I believed in family solidarity. My monthly medication alone cost $180, but I never once complained. I thought I was part of something bigger, a family bound by love, not greed. But that voice note? It was proof I was just a hurdle to clear. The message ended abruptly, like she was about to say more, but realized she'd been recorded. I played it again, this time, me catching the faint sound of laughter afterward, cruel, triumphant. I stared at the phone screen, heart pounding, mind racing. Should I confront her? Should I tell my son? But what if I was wrong? What if this was some sick joke? No, I couldn't risk it, not when my whole life and my son's future was at stake. I sank into the old armchair in the corner of the living room. The worn fabric felt rough against my skin, but I barely noticed. My mind drifted to the pension statements I had carefully tucked away last month. $12,500 saved over the past 15 years. Money I intended to leave for my son and grandson. Money Jenna wanted for herself. I recalled the small arguments Jenna and I had tried to ignore, the sharp remarks about my interference, the dismissive tone when I suggested family dinners or asked to babysit. At first, I blamed stress, exhaustion, but now it was all clear. I felt the bitterness rise, simmering beneath my skin. How could she? After everything, my mind flicked to the last time I'd seen her at the grocery store, tossing my favorite brand of coffee beans into the cart without a second thought. She didn't know I watched her, or that I noticed when she picked the cheaper diapers instead of the ones I recommended for my grandson. Every little detail now seemed like part of a bigger betrayal. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the voice note playing on repeat in my mind. I thought about my son Mark. He trusted her blindly, always defended her even when I hinted something was wrong. How many times had I brushed off that uneasy feeling? How many times did I tell myself, it's just a phase, she's stressed, they're young and figuring things out. But no more. I had to act, slowly, carefully. Revenge wasn't just about payback, it was about protecting what was mine, what was rightfully my family's. I pulled out an old notebook, the one where I'd kept track of expenses and family birthdays over the years. I flipped to the back and started writing down everything I could remember about Jenna, the moments, the lies, the little things that didn't add up, like the way she always claimed she was too busy to attend my grandson's recitals, or how she casually mentioned her savings were running low despite her job at the law firm. Then, I made a list of all the people I could trust to help me, old friends, neighbors, even my son's ex-girlfriend who always hated Jenna. It was time to start gathering evidence, planting seeds of doubt, and watching the house of cards collapse. But first, I had to be careful. Jenna was dangerous, and she was closer than I thought. And just when I thought I had a plan, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Jenna herself. "Mom, can you please stop interfering? This family doesn't need you causing trouble." I froze. She knew, or at least suspected, and that's when I realized this was no longer just about the inheritance. This was about survival. I swallowed hard, my hands shaking as I typed back, "I'm just trying to protect my family." Little did she know, I was about to protect it in ways she never imagined. I still remember the exact moment I decided to tell Mark the truth. It was a crisp morning on October 3rd, 2023. The kind where the chill bites your skin just enough to remind you that winter was creeping in. I stood in the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast filling the air, because my hands were trembling so much I couldn't hold the spatula steady. My phone lay on the counter, the voice note from Jenna still saved in my messages, taunting me with its coldness. Mark had just called to say he was stopping by after work. I could hear the smile in his voice, the same one he always reserved for his mother, but beneath that eye, I sensed something else. Maybe guilt, maybe confusion. I needed to break the silence between us, to cut through the haze of lies before it was too late. When he arrived, I invited him to sit down at the old oak dining table, our family's centerpiece, scarred and scratched from years of meals, arguments, celebrations, and heartbreak. I could see the confusion in his eyes when I asked him to listen. "Mark," I said, voice tight, "I have to show you something. Something I never wanted you to hear, but I can't keep it from you anymore." I played the voice note again, watching his face carefully as Jenna's voice filled the room, his brow furrowed, disbelief and anger battling in his expression. I felt a pang of sorrow. I hated that this moment had come to this, that I had to be the bearer of such a terrible truth. "Why would she say that?" Mark whispered, voice cracking. "She's my wife. How could she do this?" I swallowed hard, blinking back tears I refused to let fall. "I don't know, Mark, but I do know that she's been planning this for months, maybe longer. And I think she's been trying to poison me. I found empty bottles of my medication hidden in the trash last week." He went pale. I could see the storm raging inside him. Between love for his wife, loyalty to his mother, and the crushing weight of betrayal. I wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but I stayed silent. This was his burden to bear. Then he said something that broke my heart. "I should have listened to you. I was blind." I nodded, letting the silence hang between us for a moment, before I explained the small things Jenna had tried to hide, the missing money from my pension fund, the unexplained bills, the dinners she refused to attend because she had work. I told him about the voice note, the plan, the poison. Mark's hands clenched the table. "We've got to stop her," he said, voice steady, despite the fear in his eyes. That's when the slow burn began. Over the next few weeks, every interaction with Jenna became a tightrope walk. I noticed the subtle ways she tried to avoid me, glances that flicked away, sudden calls that interrupted dinners, forced smiles that didn't reach her eyes. One night, I overheard her on the phone, speaking in hushed tones about getting rid of the problem before it's too late. I kept detailed notes, dates, times, exact sums of money missing, conversations overheard. On November 12th, I noticed a $450 charge for a mysterious cleaning service Jenna claimed was for the apartment, but Mark confirmed no one had come. On November 19th, I found 2 pills missing from my bottle of blood pressure medication, the kind I take every night without fail. Every day, the weight of betrayal grew heavier, but so did my resolve. I started to distance myself emotionally from Jenna, but I couldn't distance myself from the reality that she was my son's wife, the mother of my grandson. Every family gathering became a stage where we played a dangerous game of masks and smiles. I watched her carefully, waiting for the moment when she'd slip up again. And then, on December 2nd, I got my opening. Jenna left her phone unattended on the kitchen counter. I saw the same chat window from before, her messages to an unknown contact, filled with plans, excuses, and a chilling line. "She's suspicious now. Need to act fast." My heart pounded. I saved screenshots, backing up every message, every detail. I wasn't just fighting for my life anymore. I was fighting to expose her for the world to see. That night, I called a trusted friend who was a retired lawyer. She agreed to help me gather everything we needed to confront Jenna legally and protect my family from further harm. But I knew this would come at a cost. The next day, Jenna stormed into the apartment, eyes blazing. "Why are you spying on me?" she hissed. I held up my phone, the evidence clear and undeniable. "I'm protecting my family, and this ends now." Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think you've won? You don't know what you're messing with." I met her gaze steadily. "I know exactly what I'm doing, and I won't let you destroy us." As she left, slamming the door behind her, I knew this battle was far from over. The days after Jenna's furious confrontation were some of the tensest I'd ever endured. It was like living in a house wired with silent alarms. Every creak, every muffled sound set my nerves on edge. I kept the evidence safe, backed up in 3 places, and every night I reviewed the details. Dates, payments, messages, even the times she'd slipped in poison-laced food or tried to isolate me. Mark was a rock through it all, at least on the surface. He put on a brave face, but I could see the cracks behind his eyes, the way he flinched whenever Jenna stormed past. She was becoming desperate, and her actions were growing reckless. One evening, December 15th, I was sitting by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on, when I heard a soft knock on the door. It was Mrs. Simmons, our elderly neighbor from down the hall, the one who always brought over warm cookies and had an uncanny way of noticing when something was wrong. "I thought you might like some company," she said gently, stepping inside with her usual cautious smile. I wasn't ready to unload, but something about her kindness cracked my walls. I told her about Jenna, the voice note, the poison, the lies. Mrs. Simmons nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing. "You're not the first one she's done this to," she whispered. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart thudding. "She's been involved in family dramas before, always after the money, always ruthless. I saw her with my own eyes at the community center last month, talking to a woman whose brother appeared after marrying her niece. The chill that ran down my spine wasn't just from the winter air. Jenna's past was catching up with her, and I wasn't the only one who'd been hurt. That night, armed with this new information, I took a deep breath and called my son. "Mark, I think we need to dig deeper. Jenna's history isn't as clean as she's made it seem." He agreed, and together we hired a private investigator to look into her past. The first report arrived just before Christmas. Jenna had a trail: broken families, sudden disappearances of relatives after she married into their lives, multiple financial disputes, and even a police report from another state alleging attempted fraud. None of it was public, hidden behind layers of lawyer fees and silence. I sat by the Christmas tree, the soft glow of lights mocking the cold truth. Jenna wasn't just after our inheritance. She was a professional predator, and I had been naive to think love or family could protect us. But this revelation also ignited a cold fire inside me, a fierce determination to outsmart her before she could do any more damage. I started recording every interaction, every suspicious move she made. On December 27th, I caught her slipping a suspicious powder into my tea when I wasn't looking. I discreetly took the cup and sent the sample to a lab for testing. There was no way I was going to be a victim without proof. Meanwhile, Mark confronted Jenna with the investigator's report, demanding answers. She denied everything with a venomous glare, calling us paranoid and delusional, but the cracks were showing. Her carefully built facade was crumbling. I refused to back down. I knew my next step had to be smart, surgical, not just exposing her to Mark or the law, but to everyone who mattered. And then, as January began, I received a mysterious package at the door. Inside was a photo of me and Jenna, taken without my knowledge, with a note that read, "You're playing a dangerous game. Watch your back." That was the moment I understood Jenna's threat was real, and the stakes were higher than I ever imagined. The photo was chilling. Me and Jenna, caught in a rare moment of forced civility at last summer's barbecue, but the smile on her face was a mask, cold and calculating, and the message scrawled beneath it was a clear warning. I was being watched, and I was in danger. For a split second, fear clawed at my chest, but then, beneath that fear, something darker took hold. Resolve. I wasn't about to let some threatening note dictate my life, or my son's. I locked the photo in my safe with the other evidence, then sat down to plan. Jenna's threat told me one thing. She was scared, desperate, and that was a weakness I could exploit. I started by tightening my circle of trusted allies. Mrs. Simmons agreed to keep an eye on Jenna's comings and goings, discreetly reporting back any suspicious behavior. Mark contacted a few close friends to be ready for anything. I even reached out to my grandson's preschool teacher, just to be sure Jenna couldn't manipulate situations behind the scenes. Then, I began the slow, deliberate work of turning Jenna's own tactics against her. On January 15th, I invited Jenna to a family meeting under the pretense of discussing the holiday plans. I made sure the house was subtly wired, just enough to capture audio, nothing illegal, but enough to record the venomous things she'd say once she thought no one was listening. As she arrived, dressed in that pristine designer coat I'd bought her for Christmas, ironic now, I greeted her with a calm smile that didn't reach my eyes. We sat around the table. I steered the conversation carefully, dropping hints about the inheritance, the pension, the house, watching her reactions like a hawk. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. She let slip a remark about getting rid of obstacles and making sure the old woman can't talk. My heart pounded, but I stayed composed, encouraging her to elaborate, acting as if I was naive and oblivious. The recording was crystal clear, but I didn't stop there. That night, I sent copies of the recording to Mark, our lawyer, and even the local police department. Someone needed to know what kind of person Jenna really was. The next day, Jenna was cornered. She tried to charm her way out, but the damage was done. Mark was furious, his trust shattered, and for the first time, I saw Jenna panic. She started making mistakes, missing appointments, getting defensive, and even trying to manipulate my grandson by whispering lies about me in his ear. But I was ready. I organized family gatherings, inviting everyone who mattered, friends, relatives, neighbors, and played the recording in front of them all. The room fell silent as Jenna's cold, scheming voice echoed through the speakers. Faces turned from shock to disgust. Jenna's empire of lies crumbled in that moment, and yet she refused to back down. Instead, she tried one last desperate move. She confronted me in front of everyone, accusing me of fabricating stories and destroying our family. I met her gaze with steel. "No," I said slowly. "I'm saving it." The room exploded with whispers. And in that moment, I knew the fight wasn't just about money anymore. It was about dignity, justice. Jenna stormed out that night, her threats trailing behind her like a dark cloud. But I was finally free. Or so I thought. Because 2 days later, Mark found a letter slipped under our door. No signature, just 3 words: "This isn't over." The letter's ominous words echoed in my mind as I held it in my hands. This isn't over. A cold shiver ran down my spine, but beneath that chill was a fierce resolve, and I had made her threats clear. She wanted a war. But I was done running. I was ready to end this nightmare once and for all. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my weak black coffee. The steam curled into the air, mingling with the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me. But I knew I couldn't afford to rest. I had to be smart, precise, and patient. Revenge isn't about rage, it's about control. I started by tightening security around the house, changing locks, installing cameras, and even hiring a discreet night guard. Mark was on edge but supportive, and even my grandson seemed to sense the tension in the air. Days passed, but Jenna made no move. I suspected she was hiding, planning her next strike, but I had a plan of my own. I contacted the neighbors who had witnessed Jenna's suspicious behavior over the months. I gathered their testimonies, compiling a solid case. I involved the police officially, pressing charges for harassment and attempted poisoning. The legal system was slow, but every document, every signed affidavit added weight to my side. Then came the day I'd been waiting for, the day Jenna would have to face the consequences of her actions. It was February 18th, a bitterly cold morning. I was in the living room when the doorbell rang. Mark opened it to 2 officers, stern-faced and official. Jenna was handcuffed behind them, her face pale but defiant. The neighbors whispered behind their hands as she was led inside, and I caught sight of the woman I once called family. Broken, exposed, powerless. The court case was a long, grueling process. Jenna's lies unraveled thread by thread under the weight of evidence. Her history, her threats, the poison attempts, it all came to light. The judge sentenced her to probation and mandated therapy, along with strict no-contact orders. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in reclaiming my life, my peace. I sold the apartment Jenna and Mark had lived in, using the proceeds to move into a small house near my grandson's school. The mortgage was modest, $900 a month, but the freedom was priceless. Mark and I rebuilt our relationship, stronger and wiser. He apologized for doubting me, for turning a blind eye. We promised each other honesty and vigilance from now on. And Jenna? She faded into the background. A cautionary tale whispered among the neighbors. As I sit here now, watching my grandson play in the yard, I know I survived more than just a betrayal. I survived a war. I'm older, yes, and perhaps more cautious, but I am proud. Proud that I stood my ground when everything was at stake. Proud that I protected my family with every ounce of strength left in me. Because in the end, revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about saving yourself.